All right, we'll get going here since we're a couple minutes in. I hope everyone's had a good week so far. Hopefully you guys all have the handouts I sent, and then I put handouts on each of the tables. We'll go through them today one by one, but you'll notice there's a handout for how to complete a nav log. If you're like me and you have a ground session and you're going through the massive nav log and you're like, what's going on? Don't freak out. I created this for the purpose of helping you at home doing it, so you don't have to ask your instructor every time. I also got an E6B handout here on how to use the wind side. It is fairly simple. The instructions are right at the top, but I do have this printout on how to use an E6B. And then we have VFR minimums that AOPA Air Safety Institute published, and you get to fill these in. Work with your instructor to fill them in, but these are very important for you to adhere to make you a safe pilot. Over time, as you continue practicing and building your confidence and your skill, those will change, but don't bust them unless you have a more experienced instructor with you to increase your own minimums, if that makes sense. But tonight we're talking about navigation and the wonderful joy that is flying in an airplane to somewhere. It's way more fun than flying out to the practice area and coming back. Flying to somewhere in an airplane is just a thrill. So that's what we're going to work on today. Talk about a couple different charts, time zones, Latin long, pre-flight requirements, methods of navigation, and a VFR flight plan. So the bulk of our time will be talking about a nav log and how to fill parts of it in. We're also going to be rewinding a little bit and remembering what some of the performance information you talked about in last class, how that relates to navigation. So we won't necessarily reteach it, but I'm going to go over it just to remind you what you're looking at. Okay. So different aeronautical charts. You have a sectional chart, definitely the most common. Now they expire very, very quickly. It used to be every 6 months or so, but the FAA decided to change that and charge more for the paper. Aeronautical charts, of course, you can access through things like ForeFlight. Those do upload as needed. And you'll see that reminder on your app like ForeFlight or whatever you choose to use. You can also reference skyvector.com is a very common website to see the states in terms of a sectional chart. So common one there. VFR terminal area charts, these are going to get more specific. They're a little larger in size if you open it up, if you open the paper up. And that's because they provide a lot more detail to generally class Bravo airspace, where it's very busy, often around highly congested population. Example, Denver, DFW, places like that, LAX. So for aircraft that are flying around there from other airports that are transitioning through the airspace, generally under visual flight rules that we fly as student and private pilots, it gives you more information of what to expect, where obstacles are, where common routes of travel are. So it is a little bit of a zoomed in scale. And then world aeronautical charts, you're really never gonna be seeing much of this, but they do exist. So I will move on from there. Don't need to spend a lot of time on that. Methods of navigation. There's pilotage and then there's dead reckoning. Most of the time you'll hear it together, pilotage and dead reckoning, but they're two separate things. Pilotage is navigating by reference to visible landmarks. So if I'm flying and I want to fly out to Lyman, for example, that's so easy to do with pilotage. You're really flying, the joke is you're flying IFR, I follow roads, right? You fly over Highway 24 and you go until you get to Lyman. It's a very easy flight, first cross country for new students. Be careful though, don't become complacent, because at one point Bobby had a student who got lost on her way back, ended up around the Denver area, and she called him on her phone like, I don't know where I am. And they figured out and brought her back down. but point towards Pikes Peak and you're on your way back, right? So we do have really good landmarks out here because we can see so far, because we can see so much of the ground. If you fly in areas like Florida, it's a little more of a challenge because it's so densely treed and different things like that. Trying to see a distinct landmark in that dense forestry, whether it's the Everglades or let's say you're in the Appalachians or something like that, it's a little more challenging. Of course, if you're used to the area, pilotage becomes a lot easier. I have students ask me, okay, if we're going to go out to the practice area, I need my GPS so I know how to get back. I'm like, no, you don't. I'm going to show you where to go. And as you continue to practice, you'll be able to return blindfolded because roads, barns, easy things like that will pop up and you'll know them and I know exactly where I'm going. But if you tell that to someone who's new to the area, they really won't know until they have some time to familiarize themselves. So be aware of using pilotage if you're in an unfamiliar area. Dead reckoning, you're adding math into the equation. You're figuring out direction and distance from a known position. You're using that to figure out, ETA, gallons used. And you use that based on true airspeed, based on ground speed, based on winds, pressure, altitude. All of that stuff comes together into giving you these calculations. And we'll go through that a little later when we're talking about the Navlog, how to find the information you're looking for and to fill it in. Okay, but that's dead reckoning. You're adding the math to it. Radio navigation. Be careful when you're hearing this. This does not mean I'm going to talk on the radio and communicate with my words. Yes, that is a radio, but what we mean by radio navigation is they're using radio waves, just at a different frequency of what you talk over. So the frequency, for example, with VORs, there's just a lower megahertz than you do to communicate. But radio navigation, you have VORs, NDB, ILS. The one you really need to worry about is VOR, and we'll talk about VOR navigation here in a minute. Unfortunately, that's going out the window slowly as we get more and more technology, specifically around GPS. So it is ground-based navigation. I do still train it a lot. I think it's very valuable to know, and you are still tested on it. So even though it's not as heavily emphasized a point of navigation, it's still very much a real thing you need to be aware of. So we do talk about it, we do train on it, you will be tested on it, both in the written and in the practical flight. NDB, don't worry about that. That's definitely gone out the window. There's very few of those around. Non-directional beacon is what that stands for. Basically has a needle and it points to the station. That's all it does. If you fly around it, that needle's turning on your dial, points directly to the station, doesn't really tell you much else. If you ever want to fly internationally, go down to South America, there's NDBs down there a lot, but not in the States so much. Localizer, that's something for instrument training. So if you move on, you'll hear localizer and ILS approaches. That uses radio navigation as well. Okay, but don't worry about that until you move on to instrument training. GPS, everyone's favorite thing to do, navigate by GPS. It's reassuring because it's very, very reliable. In the plane, it's easy. You follow the magenta line and you're like, oh man, that's so easy. I know where I'm going. Boom. Be careful when you're flying by GPS. I've seen this a lot in students. They stare at it. They fixate on it. They ignore the rest of their instruments. They don't look outside. And does anyone remember how much time you should spend looking outside? Roughly, percentage-wise. Yeah, about 90% of the time should be spent looking outside, not looking at that GPS. Besides, it's prettier to look outside. That's the cool part of flying. So don't fixate on your GPS. I have seen that quite often. And then I cover it up and then everyone gets pissed at me and I'm like, well, you shouldn't have fixated on it, your problem. And then they figure it out. So don't be surprised at some point in your training, whether you do it intentionally or not, your instructor will cover up instruments and require you to look outside. Time zones. These are questions that definitely come up on the written exam. They are located, the time zones are located very near to lines of longitude with about a 15-degree separation. So as you can see in the United States, we've got our Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific Standard or Daylight Time, depending on the time of year. And roughly they align with lines of longitude. However, they don't exactly, because communities kind of want to be in sync with kind of their neighbors, and they don't want to have the back and forth of the time zone confusion nightmare. So that's why it looks a little off kilter. So what we use in aviation is Zulu time. And if you're a nerd like me, you put Zulu time on your watch in addition to your regular time. It does change. Let me say this. The Zulu time relative to daylight standard or daylight savings time changes with standard and daylight time. So for example, part of the year, Zulu time is 7 hours different from our location to Greenwich, England. Or some time of the year it's 6 hours different, depending on if we're in standard or daylight time. Does that make sense? Finally get the words out in the right order, I think. So be aware of that. Know if it's standard or daylight. Let's see. On your airport information, if you look at that AFD or that chart supplement, it will tell you what the location is, the time zone is at that location. You are going to be asked questions like, hey, I'm going to depart from Seattle and I'm going to go to Daytona Beach, Florida. The flight is going, I'm in a really fast aircraft. Flight's going to take me 3 hours, which is a ridiculous time, but let's just say 3 hours, coast to coast, okay? If I depart, if my local time is 10:30, let's say standard, Pacific Standard Time, what will my arrival time be in Daytona Beach if it's a 3-hour flight? You're assuming standard time for both locations unless they tell you otherwise. Like if it's Arizona, Arizona doesn't change. Right, that's why yeah, they'll tell you. So 3-hour flight departing 10:30 Pacific Standard Time. What time am I going to arrive Eastern Standard Time? Huh? 4:30? Does everyone agree? 2:30? So 2:30, we're looking at a 4-hour gap of time, right? So you've got your 3-hour travel time plus your 3-hour difference. Make sense? And because Eastern Standard Time is ahead of Pacific Time, it's a 6-hour change. So yes, that 6-hour window, 4:30 is what you're going to be looking at. And then you'll realize, like, is it standard or day? I can't remember which one is which. I think standard time is it's 4 hours behind Zulu time. So then if you arrive 4:30, it would be 8:30 Zulu. Or as you're going to have to get used to it, what's that in military time? Sweet. So 16:30 is correct for the arrival. We're converting it into 20:30 for military time with the Zulu. So perfect. Yes. Get in the mindset of creating that, getting in the mindset of using military time, because it'll make answering those questions a lot easier. You're going to hear estimated time of arrival, of departure. It's going to be in military time. And then you can bug your family when you start talking that way and they're like, you are a psycho, you need to stop. Speaking from experience. So does that make sense to everyone? I recommend, how long's the flight? In the same time zone, okay, it's going to be 3 hours, so 10:30, change it to 1:30, and then the time zone difference gives it to 4:30. So just take it a step at a time, and you'll get that answer proper. Wow, it's been a long day. I can't talk. Okay, Latitude, longitude. One way to remember it, lat is fat, goes around the world. Long is long, pole to pole. So if you can't remember which one goes which, the way I remember it is latitude has that extra T in it, lat. And when I draw that cross on the T, that goes around the world. That's just how I remembered it. I don't care how you remember it, so long as you don't confuse them. There's not a whole lot of questions on the written about this in particular to, hey, find the lat and long of this location. However, be aware of it. On your sectional, you'll see lat and long, the grids. They're just simple grid marks that are black on your sectional. So you can find your lines of longitude and latitude. And then you can use the little hash marks in between the longer lines to really pin it down to specific minutes or specific decimals, however you want to write it. Okay, make sense? Now, this is based off of true north, so they do converge as you get closer to a pole. So, for example, if you're flying a cross-country route and you're flying from, let's give an exaggerated example, flying down from Amarillo, Texas up to Chicago, right? You're getting, as you continue to fly north, those meridians are getting closer and closer and closer together. Well, as you're flying, let's say you're flying by pilotage, you're looking outside point to point to point, you have to find the true course of your route. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But you need to do it based on kind of the average of where those lines are heading. So don't, if you got a course length that crosses a couple lines, find the middle of it to gauge what the true course is. And I'll show you that in a minute, so I don't expect you to completely understand what I'm saying right now. But understand that they do converge, so it does give a little bit of a wonky measurement if you're I don't know how that happened. Yeah, someone is having fun and I enjoy it. That's cool. Anyway, let's see, degrees, minutes, seconds, and degrees and decimals. There are two different ways to write lines of lat and long. Two different ways to write your coordinates. Those coordinates are for Meadow Lake Airport. Does anyone, so can everyone see that on the first one, we've got 56, 26.99. If you convert that into a decimal, that's 56 minutes out of an hour out of 60 minutes. Convert that to a decimal, it's 0.948886 or 886. So it's pretty easy to convert that. It's just a division problem. Either way you write it is correct, so long as you understand how to connect the dots there. Make sense? Okay. Moving on. Okay. Sorry. Pre-flight action. This is a regulation you're definitely going to have to know. 91-103. It's pre-flight action. You have to do this before you fly. Does anyone... No one has a FAR in front of them. That's okay. I'll read this to you really quickly. Do you want to? I've got an electronic version. Yeah. So I do love the paper FAR book. It's very, in my opinion, I really enjoy it. I also have a FAR app, which updates automatically. So that's a plus. I do recommend both, especially if you continue on into CFI in particular, where you have to memorize the crap out of all these. All right, 91-103 pre-flight action. Each pilot in command shall, not maybe, not if they want to, each pilot in command shall, before beginning a flight, become familiar with all available information concerning that flight. This information must include, for a flight under IFR or a flight not in the vicinity of an airport, guess what? That means if you're not in the traffic pattern, pretty much. Weather reports and forecasts, fuel requirements, alternatives available if the planned flight cannot be completed, and any known traffic delays of which the pilot in command has been advised by ATC. For any flight, runway lengths at airports of intended use, and the following takeoff and landing distance information. For civil aircraft for which an approved airplane or rotorcraft flight manual containing takeoff and landing distance data is required, the takeoff and landing distance data contained therein. Basically, you need to do your performance calculations. Can you land and take off on that runway or on the runways of your alternate airports? For civil aircraft, other than those specified in Bravo 1 of the section, other reliable information appropriate to the aircraft relating to aircraft performance under expected values of airport elevation, runway slope, gross weight, wind, and temperature. You're doing your performance calculations. That's what that is saying. So there is an acronym, NW Craft. Most people think this is only for IFR. That is not the case. This is for any time you're going away from that airport. And honestly, it's a good thing to know and to do even if you're staying in the traffic pattern. Because what if someone comes in and they blow up a tire on the runway, or they crash, or something happens and you cannot land here? Well, you got to go someplace else. Okay, so it's still important to know the airports in the area. Can you make it on the fuel you've got in the plane? Can you land and take off there? That's still good information to know. So, NOTAMs. What are NOTAMs? Notice to airmen, exactly. Check and make sure there's no NOTAMs in the area. For example, you don't want to have a VIP NOTAM pop up and, oh, lo and behold, you just flew into the president or the vice president's TFR. Don't do that. You don't need to be flying formation with an F-22. Be cool, but don't do that. Weather, known air traffic control delays, route or runway lengths. Knowing the runway lengths is crucial information, knowing if you can take off or land. Alternates, fuel, takeoff and landing distance. Quick question, guys. How much fuel must you have reserve? How much fuel reserve must you have upon landing, according to the regulations? Bare minimum daylight time. Anybody? You can guess. Nope, good guess, not 30 minutes. Someone just got it online. So 10 gallons can mean a lot of different things for different types of airplanes. So it's not a gallon, it's a time frame. You got 30 minutes. What about nighttime? What's the requirement for nighttime flying? Upon landing, how much reserve must you have? 45, yes, bingo, 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 good. 45 minutes at a bare minimum per the regulations. Now, you're all new pilots. I really recommend you putting more than those minimums in there. Most of the time, I put more than those minimums in there. I don't want to end up in a situation where I'm like, oh, crap. Now I'm going to have to declare an emergency and land because I'm running out of fuel. Not exactly what I want to be doing. And that can depend. The more experienced you are, the better you are at manipulating the aircraft and leaning it out for fuel economy, different things like that. The more conservative you can be with your minimums. If I'm flying up around Denver, there are airports every 2 feet in Denver, so I don't need as much extra fuel as if I was flying out to middle of nowhere, Kansas, where there's not as many places to land. Make sense? All of that information starts to put a picture together for your cross country. What do I need? What is the environment I'm flying around? How do I plan this route?
When would you declare an emergency based on fuel?
Cool. The question was, when did it declare an emergency based on fuel? That's a hard thing to answer with a cut and dry question, but I would say if you are flying and you're reading low fuel enunciators on both of your fuel tanks, and the big thing is they're not clearing you to land, I would let them know low fuel, I need to land. You're not declaring an emergency, but you're basically telling them I need priority. An emergency is your engine starts to, you're like down to 2 gallons. Your engine starts to maybe cough and spit a little bit. It's not really operating very well, and all of a sudden you have no fuel. You're now a glider. And hopefully your plane can glide a little bit. You know, if you're in a diamond, that's basically a powered glider. If you're in an Archer, or, well, more like a, let's go with a Seminole heavier plane, doesn't glide as well, you're coming down and you're gonna just have to find a spot on the ground to land. So I can't exactly say at this point, but before you reach the emergency, the key thing is let them know, hey, I'm running out of fuel, I need to land. Hopefully that way you don't have to do paperwork either. But they might want you to give them a call. Remember, they don't want to do paperwork either, so they want to help you out. And of course, they want to keep you safe. So I passed out, and everyone should have a link to this. This is the VFR pilot personal minimums contract. I highly, highly, highly recommend that you do fill this in and you do discuss it with your CFI. Like I said before, this will change as you have more experience, as you encounter different situations. My experience flying in turbulence, my experience flying in the mountains, my experience flying in different scenarios allows me to have different minimums than someone with my same number of hours because I have different experiences, and vice versa. I might want to be more conservative with my minimums down around some storms down in Florida than people who are down there all the time. Okay. Don't let your examiner, don't let your friends, your family, don't let you push you past these minimums. That's how you end up a news story. Please don't end up as a news story. These will increase as you fly with a CFI who is more skilled and can get you to that next level. When I started flying, I thought 10 knots was bad. Now I don't even blink at it, right? You'll get there. But be wise in getting there. Don't be up there by yourself trying to prove that you can get past these minimums, because you're going to end up breaking the plane yourself and something else. Please don't do that. So talking about VORs again, it's VHF, omnidirectional range is what it stands for. You'll see them on the sectional in different ways. They're VOR or VOR/DME. Does anyone know what DME is? Distance measuring equipment. So it's telling you not only your direction to the station, but also your distance from the station. VOR-TAC, TACAN, is something that the military uses. So a VOR-TAC is something that combines civilian and military equipment. It gives you both direction and distance. Okay. VOR-TACs are very common. Megahertz range is lower than the communication radios, but it's 108 to 117.95. Okay, so that's the range of the, again, radio frequency. This is line of sight navigation. So if I'm 30 miles away from a VOR, just taking off from the ground, I'm not going to get reception because the station is not able to send a signal directly to my airplane. I need enough altitude in order to receive that signal. Does that make sense? Okay, so it is line of sight. Generally, reception range at an altitude of 1,000 feet is about 40 to 45 miles. As a pilot, you can do checks on the VOR to make sure it is working properly. You don't need a mechanic to do that. Some of the 5 checks a mechanic does have to do, like a bench test. They're taking it and basically performing a test on it, but they need to do it. You as a pilot can do tests in flight on the ground, but you can check it. If you are IFR, it is absolutely required. It is mandated that you check that every 30 days. If you're flying using VORs or using VORs as a backup on a cross country, even if it's VFR, even if you're a private pilot, you should check them anyway. Okay? Just because it's not regulated doesn't mean it's not a good thing to do. All right, using a VOR. So, biggest thing that students forget is tuning and IDing. Does anyone have any idea what I mean when I say tune and ID the VOR? That's okay. So basically, you on your audio, on your avionics panel, you can, for example, hit the button that says nav1, just where it would say like COM1 or COM2, and you can listen to it. So you hit nav1 if you're using that radio, and you'll hear Morse code come over the frequency. You might hear some other things, but Morse code is what we're looking for. On your sectional, it will tell you next to the name of the VOR and the frequency required to tune into that station. It will tell you the 3-digit Morse code identifier. You don't have to know Morse code. It literally tells you ... dash, right there. You do need to listen to it to make sure you're tuned into the right one. Last thing you want to be doing is navigating to the wrong VOR. Now you're getting lost and confused and putting yourself into a situation that no pilot wants to be in. Okay? So tune in ID, do not miss this on your check ride. Do not miss this in real life. A lot of students do. Okay? Reverse sensing. You'll hear this a lot. There's no such thing as reverse sensing if you actually know how to read a VOR. And I'm going to show you that. It makes it way easier to answer some of your navigation questions on your written exams if you know how to do this. Okay, so most people think you fly towards the needle. And actually, give me just a second. I'm going to switch over to my whiteboard here. Okay, so most people say fly towards the needle. So if my needle's deflected over on the left here, I'm flying along. Whoops, wrong way. Sorry, guys. I'm flying along and the needle's going toward my left. I need to fly over to my left to intercept that course. And I want it centered. Okay. And as I fly left, it's going to start swinging back and centering. Well, guess what, guys? That's not how you do it. So what I'm going to show you is a little different. Very simple, actually. And when you fly in the plane, it'll make a lot more sense as you're actually twisting a dial to let this radial move. So I'm going to take it a bit at a time here and kind of walk through what I can without a working navigational instrument. So first of all, as you're flying, you've tuned in the Black Forest VOR, you've identified it, and now you've got this doohickey instrument in your airplane. You're like, now how do I actually use the darn thing? What you're going to want to do is there's an OBS needle, or I apologize, an OBS dial down here. And it kind of acts like your heading indicator. You can twist it, and then all these, this is basically a compass card. These will turn based on twisting your OBS, and you'll start to see your needle swing back and forth based on how quickly you're turning that OBS. Okay. So first thing you want to do is turn it slowly so you don't overshoot it, and turn it so that this CDI needle, course direction indicator, centers in the middle. That's telling you the radial from the station. So your radial, does anyone know what a radial is? Huh? What? What? No, okay. I'm like, so a radial is basically from a station out. So this is our little station. Okay. Woohoo. Radial is a specific line that's going out from the station on a specific path. You've got another radial over here. That's 160. You got another radial over here, 090, coming out from the station, and it looks like a big like spoke, tire or something like that. Okay. As you get closer together, notice how they get tighter, just like on a wheel, just on a bike tire. Same idea. Actually. All right, let's see if I can do this. Okay, same idea. Your station is the center of the tire. Each radial is each one of these spokes coming out from it. and it's got its own direction, its own specific number assigned to it based on direction, right? That's a radial. It's coming out. Anyone know what a bearing is? The opposite. So if a radial is coming out, a bearing is going towards the station bearing. I have a 090 radial out, and 090 is east, right? 90 radial. If I'm heading towards the station, I'm on my 270 radial. I'm heading due west towards the station. It's the exact same line. It's just the difference of direction, if I'm going away or towards. Does that make any sense? Who does not understand it? So I want to make sure you do. Okay. Like I said, it's easier when you can move the darn thing in the airplane, but we're doing what we can. So now that we covered that, radials out, bearing is 2. Yeah, no, quick question. Oh, let me see if I bumped the, no, I'm still looking good. Are you not hearing me? Okay, I'm going to restart my, is that better? No. It's easy, you gotta love it. Check, 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 anything? Hello, hello, hello. Nada? Am I on the right frequency? They said good. Oh, we're good.
I can hear you.
Oh, sweet. Well, cool. Someone came off mute. I appreciate it. Let me know. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, it's a work in progress. All right. That's okay for now. Yep. Yeah, that's all I need. You're good. Thanks, Monique. Okay. So now that I explained the difference between radial and bearing, I'm going to give you guys an example. So, for example, this is one of our navigational VORs. It's reading a 2 flag. Okay, this is towards the station. This is from the station. Some will literally say to, some will literally say from. But either way, it'll indicate if you're going to or from a station. So if I'm reading to a station, what am I reading? A bearing or a radial? Bearing, exactly. Right now, I am tuned into a bearing towards the station. Okay, I've got 273 lined up at the top of my compass card, and my needle is off center. So I'm not actually on 273, but I'm somewhere close to it because it's not fully deflected. It is somewhere in my view. If I was fully deflected off to one side, I wouldn't know if I was, how close I was. I'd have to bring that radial in until it's centered. Okay. But now that I can see it's somewhere near me, 273 is approximately what cardinal heading? North, south, east, or west? West. Yep, about 270, so it's about west. What would this be? This side of the compass card be? East. How about this one? North and south. Okay, so I'm visualizing to myself the cardinal headings. You do not fly to the left because the needle's deflected to the left. You fly towards the south because it's deflected towards the south. I am not saying fly 180. I am just saying fly more southbound than you are right now. And as you continue to fly southbound, this will start to come in until it's centered. Okay. So what this is telling me is if I've got my 273 bearing to the station, which is basically this. Would everyone agree? To the station, 273 bearing. Okay. I need to fly south. So where am I relative to that line? The opposite. North. Yep. I am somewhere north of the station. It doesn't matter what direction I'm pointing. I'll explain that in a minute. But I'm somewhere north of the station. And I need to find out, well, how far north am I? Well, the nice thing about VORs is they kind of help you with that. Each dot is about 2 degrees off of what you're on. Okay, so this is 1, 2, and 1. So this is 3 degrees difference from the radial I'm reading from the radial I'm actually on. If I am 3 degrees to the north of bearing 273, what is my new bearing? Yes. I'm going to take it back. Rewind. No, it's not 276 because my 273 is this way. 276 would be more like that. So it would be 270 bearing to the station. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so I'm 3 degrees off of what this is saying based on my dot. Making sense? Almost?
Why aren't they the same thing? Why
What?
is flying left and flying south the same thing?
That's why I've got this right here.
All right.
Okay, so cardinal heading, east, right? West, and then I've got north here, south here. 093 from, am I on a bearing or a radial? Radial. Guess what? A 093 radial is the exact same as my 273 bearing. Exact same line. Okay. So what I need to do over here is see how this is pointing to the right? If I flew to the right or flew to the left, exactly, don't do that. Now, you want to, if you're flying towards the station, you want to have a 2 indication, bottom line. But let's say you get confused, you get back to, and you get it off kilter and you're backwards. You're never going to reverse sense if you know how to read it. So you know how you need to fly to the south more. So basically the same thing. You are 3 degrees north of it because you need to fly south. So you're somewhere up on the 090 radial and you need to fly south to intercept it. That's why you don't just fly to the left or fly to the right. Okay. So exact same line, but if I flew left versus flew right, one would be correct and the other one would be backwards, right? If you just fly the cardinal heading, you're never going to have that issue. Okay. This helps a lot with your written because it'll tell you, say, hey, I've got my station right here. I've got an airplane that's up here. I've got an airplane that's down here. One that's here. One that's here. Which plane am I? It's got the different aircraft all around. And it'll give you generally a heading, and it'll give you an image of a VOR. So if you can figure out, if I need to fly south to intercept it, then I'm north of it. So get rid of everything that's south, right? You're starting to eliminate all the possibilities. It makes it a whole lot easier because you can't turn this on the written test and make your life easy like you can in an airplane. So knowing this trick makes your written a whole lot easier, okay? It also gives reassurance in flying so you don't go the wrong way. That's VOR navigation. Now, like I said before, generally what you want to do is you want to fly towards the station. If you're flying towards the station, don't overcomplicate your life. And then you do want to keep that needle centered. So if that needle's centered, fly that course. Now, what's the difference between course and heading? Anybody? Anybody? Not exactly. Heading is the direction the nose is pointed.
the aircraft. Course is the direction you're going over the ground. So everyone heard of crabbing when you're flying? Or looking at a crab, they don't walk straight? Planes don't fly straight, and that's because of wind. Wind tries to push us off our track, so we have to correct into it ever so slightly. So most of the time, your heading and your course are not the same. So be aware, if your VOR is telling you to fly a 273 course, your heading indicator is probably not going to say 273, okay? It's probably going to be a few degrees off based on the strength of the wind. So don't see 273, okay, I'm going to look just at my heading indicator and fly 273. You're going to wind up off your course. Fly your course. Your heading indicator is very helpful. I'll let your instructor explain how to use both of them in tandem, but you can't use one and not the other. I was going to say something else about this. Darn it. Oh yeah. As you cross over the station, the way this works is, man, we need a better whiteboard. Okay. So here's your station. By the way, it looks like a sombrero. Has anyone ever seen the VOR station that's out here off Woodman next to the Buddha temple over there or whatever it is? Okay, it looks like a sombrero. So you'll see the station on the ground, and it's sending a signal up. Okay, that's how it sends out a signal to pilots. Then you're gonna, if you're flying over top of it, first of all, your distance is going to never be exactly spot on because it's giving you this error. There's going to be, you know, if you're reading directly over to the station, it's giving you distance relative to the azimuth, not to just to the ground station. It's not like it's GPS. But then you're going to come into this area. It's called the cone of confusion or the cone of ambiguity. That's directly above it. It doesn't send a signal straight up. So what's going to happen is you're going to see a 2 flag. You're flying towards the station. All of a sudden, this turns into basically, you're going to see a red or orange striped flag, means there's no reception. It's not receiving anything. You're over this cone of confusion. You're going to see this needle fully deflect one side to the other side. And then you're going to see the flag switch to from. Now you've passed through it. Now the station's behind you. Okay, so that's how you know you've crossed over a station. Okay. VOR navigation is actually very easy. Don't let it intimidate you. A lot of new pilots think, oh, that's old, that's antiquated, that's stupid, I'm not going to fly that way. Appreciate what it's offering. It's actually providing pretty good navigation. Okay. Now to figure out how to get back here. Stop. And there we go. Also, don't get tricked on bearing versus radial. The written will try to trick you. Don't let it happen. GPS, know what the equipment is in the aircraft. There's different levels of GPS with how specific, how accurate it can be. So be aware of that. There are GPS outages occasionally. Be aware of that as well. Those are published on NOTAMs. And a GPS does not necessarily mean that it's user-friendly for everyone. A G1000 is different than a G175, different than an Avidyne, different from a KLN. There's different types of GPSs that aircraft have based on just the avionics stack that they have equipped. So don't go up into an aircraft that has different avionics from what you're used to without going up with someone who's experienced in using those. Okay. Know what you have. This is out of the PAC. While GPS has many benefits to the VFR pilot, care must be exercised to ensure that the system capabilities are not exceeded. It's not the catch-all. You still are the pilot. You're still in charge. GPS is not in charge. Okay? You are still pilot in command. However, it is highly, highly reliable. RAIN capability, it's you'll hear the need to check your RAIN capability on the GPS, make sure it's working. And it stands for Receiver Autonomous Integrity Monitoring. The number of satellites in range and in view of your GPS, the more accurate that will be. So if only 3 satellites are in range of your GPS, you're going to have 2-dimensional coverage. No vertical guidance, just telling you where you are laterally. If you have 4 satellites in range, that's 3-dimensional. 5 satellites in range, then you have fault detection. It can tell you if something is wrong. And 6 satellites in range, it'll actually exclude whatever satellite isn't working. It'll get rid of the one that's not working. So if you've got the world, right, you can get a lot of satellites in view of one area. But if you're, got one that's beyond the horizon, that one's not part of your constellation. Only the ones within the horizon are part of your constellation, and they change as you travel and as the satellites travel. Okay. WAAS navigation through GPS is highly, highly accurate within feet. It is acceptable for IFR flight to some pretty good minimums, 200 feet above the ground. And I tell you what, when you take those foggles off or you come out of the clouds 200 feet above the runway, you're like, holy crap. Okay, that was really close. It's pretty darn accurate. Okay. Shoot.
So if you have GPS on your tablet or whatever, is that it's not the same?
Good question. No, ForeFlight does not count. GPS on your tablet is good for situational awareness only. It is not legal for navigation. Very good question. And don't get me wrong, it's amazing for situational awareness. Use it, but not legal for navigation. All right, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about nav logs, which is the focus of tonight. Quick break.
Okay. Oh, geez, now I'm coughing. One thing I didn't send to the Zoom people is a nav log specifically. Don't worry about it. We'll go through this, and if you want to write it down in your notes or print one off while I'm talking, that's great. You can just Google any nav log, and most of them will look pretty identical to the one up here. And then we're going to be using SkyVector and an electronic E6B to help with our people on Zoom. But bear with me as I haven't done this with Zoom before, so this will be fun. Putting a navlog together is generally a student's worst nightmare, and I can appreciate it. When I was a student prepping for my check ride, putting my navlog together, I was so frustrated at one point, I kind of exclaimed, "Oh," and I kind of flipped my pen and I was like, I got to walk away. People in the office came out, they thought someone had like fallen and died. I'm like, it wasn't that loud, guys, but okay. I'll admit that I didn't really understand a navlog until I was a CFI and I had to know it so I could teach it. Which is why I have prepared a couple how-to documents for you so you don't struggle as much as I did. Okay. It's not intimidating when you take it a bite at a time. So that's what we're going to do today. And for the guys in class, I do apologize. It looks like the latest copies of the navlog came out really badly. You can't really see what's in those gray boxes, but it is exactly what's on the screen up here. Okay. So we're going to walk through what we do. First of all, with a navlog is primarily used for pilotage and dead reckoning. You're generally not going to use it as much in terms of the step-by-step process with VOR and GPS navigation. You will still need to know your ground speed, so you know your fuel and your estimated time en route and all that good stuff. But navigation is a little different, so you don't have to go through all the steps. Regardless of how you're flying, how you're navigating, you need to still do your pre-flight action, know what you're doing, know the airport information you're taking off from, you're going to, all that good stuff. So there are notes in here that you need to put together. Aircraft number, notes on the aircraft, notes on your route, any general notes like, hey, my co-pilot likes to fall asleep on me. Actually, while she was the pilot and I was co-pilot, so be careful of that. Not actually kidding there, that happened to me, and I was really, really pissed at her. That was fun. Yeah, flying over the Appalachian Mountains. She falls asleep and like out cold. And at that point, I wasn't good at flying in the right seat because I hadn't done it before. So the plane was kind of going up and down a little bit. You're all backwards with that muscle memory. And I was watching him like, are you alive, asleep, or are you like dying? Nope, her chest is moving. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I got pretty pissed at her. And she did it again later, a couple days later. So anyway, story aside, you're going to put those notes in there, checkpoints or fixes. So, for example, if we are going on a cross country from here to Lyman, I'm going to pick different visual points I can use as pilotage. So I'm going to go from Meadow Lake to Peyton to Calhan to Rama, find points along the way. And as I find them, I'm going to write them down in my checkpoint block there. Okay. Don't forget where you're departing from. That's your first point. Also, one thing to bear in mind is your top of climb. So we won't get into it as much today because of how I reformatted the class, but you do have to calculate climb information. If your first point is 10 miles away and it takes 8 miles of that to climb based on the performance calculations you've done, then it's departure, top of climb, first point. If it takes 12 miles to climb, then it's departure, first point, then top of climb, then on. Okay, so be aware of that. Understand that your climb performance is different than your cruise performance. Okay, so just keep that in the back of your mind. We're only going to be talking about cruise performance today, but that's still something for you guys to remember. You can put VOR information in there if you're flying by VOR, even if you're not putting a backup frequency in there. Let's say you get lost. Black Forest VOR is right here. So if I'm coming back from Lyman,
I can tune in that VOR and get pretty darn close to the airport if I'm really not sure where I'm going. So you get the backup options. Choose your altitude. If you are flying towards Lyman on a VFR cross country, what altitude should you be flying at? Anybody? You are tested on this, by the way. No? If you're flying 360 degrees due north, anywhere from that to 179 degrees, then you're flying eastbound. You need to be at odd 1,000 feet plus 500. So what that means is 9,500, 11,500, 5,500. Can we fly at 5,500 at the Lyman? No, of course not. But if you're down at sea level, sure, that's a very realistic altitude. That regulation only applies if you're more than 3,000 feet above the ground. Okay, so if you're within 3,000 feet of the ground, flying cross country, you can fly whatever you want to. But they're basically setting up this regulation above that altitude to create different overpasses in the sky, if you will, for different direction traffic and different flight rules traffic, IFR versus VFR. Okay, if you're flying 180 up to 359 degrees, you're basically flying west at that point. So anyone want to take a guess what altitudes you're going to be flying at there? Even 1,000 plus 500, exactly right. So that'll be 8,500, 10,500, 3,500, right? Depending on where you're flying. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. You're also going to have to change altitudes based on the terrain. If I'm flying all the way out to Omaha, Omaha's pretty close to sea level. It's only 1,000 or 2,000 feet. I think it's even less than 1,000 actually. Pretty close to sea level. I'm going to slowly start to descend as I get nearer and nearer because I don't want to be coming in there at 9,500 and drop 9,000 feet to the airport. I'm going to change my altitude as I continue flying. And another thing to consider is your winds aloft. Remember talking about that in your weather classes? Your winds aloft do change different altitudes. So I'm going to try to find the right altitude that'll give me a tailwind. I don't want to be fighting with that headwind and going slower. Okay, so that can also dictate your altitude. So you'll write your altitude. Generally, if you're flying 9,500, it's a really small space, so I'll put 9.5. I'm not flying at 95 feet, right? So generally put 9,5 or 9.5 in that box. If I'm climbing, I put a little arrow up in front of it. If I'm descending, I'll put a down arrow and then descending down to, let's say I'm descending down to traffic pattern altitude. Around here at 7,700, so I'll put down arrow 7.7. That's just how I notate that, and it fits in that box. Yes.
Is that 9,000 anywhere?
In the U.S. For VFR, yes, it is anywhere in the U.S. Even 1,000 plus 500, odd 1,000 plus 500. That is the requirement. Yes. Yep. Based on east-west heading, and then if you're IFR, it's evens or odds, no 500. So there are 500-foot altitude separation between different routes of traffic. Okay, good question. Winds. Remember, one thing on your pre-flight action is weather. So you want to pick up the winds, the information at your departure and arrival airports. You want to pick up your winds aloft. And winds aloft change. If I'm flying out to Goodland, Goodland has a winds aloft reporting station out there. So as I get closer and closer and closer to them, I'm going to use their winds aloft data and not Pueblo's, right? So your winds aloft will change as you continue to fly. Don't think, one and done. That's not how it works. And then it's got direction, velocity, temperature. Temperature is important for determining different performance information. So don't forget that temperature is part of that as well. Okay. Distance, this is very easy. If you've already figured out your checkpoints, you can use your plotter to figure out distances since there's a ruler on your plotter. Now make sure you're using the correct setting There's a statute miles and a nautical miles. You need to use nautical miles when you're using that sectional. Okay. And then there's different scales on here. For example, mine has sectional chart and world area chart scales on here. I'm going to be using my my sectional scale, so just be aware of what you're using. But your plotter will tell you. Okay. So then you can put that down, and then you can total it up and figure out, you know, if it's 100 miles, I've flown 10 miles on the first leg, there's 90 miles remaining. So you can put all that information in very quickly. Don't forget to put in your airport information, ATIS, weather, altimeter, runway, all that good stuff. Put that information in there for your departure and arrival airports. If you have more than one airport you're going to be stopping at, use a couple different nav logs, or put the notes, put that information up in the notes. Okay, write that down. You don't know when your iPad's going to die. You don't know when your radios are going to die, and you don't know when your cell phone's going to die, when you can call your CFI and go, please help me. Okay, you want to write that down on paper. Question online, yes. Nautical miles is for the sectional. That's how it's laid out. Does that answer your question? Just the units they use. Okay. Cool. So yeah, don't know why you can't just go with one measurement and call it good, but we have to be special. Proper checkpoint selection is vital. So anyone want to try to fly out to Lyman and use Rama Reservoir right now? It's probably dry. Probably not the best waypoint to use. Okay. If it's in, you know, late spring, we've had a lot of rain. Sure, there's going to be a reservoir there. You can see it. But reservoirs in particular, you got to be very careful with. Okay. Towers, sometimes a challenge to see. Roads are great so long as you can identify one road from another. I can identify I-70. I can identify Highway 24. I couldn't necessarily identify Rama Highway if I, you know, didn't know it, things like that. So be aware of what checkpoints you're using. Checkpoints we use around here all the time: Springs East Airport, the wind farm, the fairgrounds at Calhan, very specific. It's not just the town, it's the fairgrounds on the east side of town. One tower that is easily identifiable if you ever fly down to Pueblo is the KOAA tower down there. It's a big tower and it's very easy to spot. Some other towers, not so much. So just be aware of it. Okay. If a sectional isn't enough for you, go ahead and pull up a Google Earth shot and take a look at what you'll actually be seeing as you're flying. That'll help a lot. Okay, now we get to go in the fun stuff. So we get to talk, excuse me, start with true course. So first thing we want to do is we're going to make some imaginary fixes up. So does everyone have online SkyVector pulled up so you can see, for example, Calhan and Rama on SkyVector? And for everyone in class, the sheet I passed out to you, you can see Calhan and Rama. Go ahead and put a mark on each one of those. And then we're going to use a plotter, draw a line between the two, and figure out true course. They are, we've got Calhan and Rama. Or Calhan's right there, yeah. Does everyone see it? And for everyone online, I do, please let us know, let Monique know if you need me to explain something again, slow down. This is kind of where I'm improvising, seeing how I do, because I am walking around class, making sure everyone here is seeing it.
So just when you draw the line, just use the dots.
Yeah, just a couple dots. It's basically you're in preschool again. You're playing connect the dots. Kind of fun. Okay. One thing that everyone on Zoom can do is they can connect the dots electronically on SkyVector. And you guys can do this as well if you don't have a paper sectional in front of you. But they can find the distance from Calhan to Rama by putting 2 points on SkyVector. So if they can go ahead and work on that, you can also use ForeFlight if you've got ForeFlight. Find the distance, and then we're going to find the true course. So using the proper scale, can anyone tell me what the distance is from Calhan to Rama? Everyone agree with 9? Does anyone not agree with 9? Anyone online? Anyone in class? Okay. Yeah, I can see where it's either about an 8 or a 9, depending on how you position your plotter, but we'll go with 9. Okay. Oh, it's the second time I dropped that magnet. Not going to try to do that again. 9 nautical miles. Okay. Now this is tricky. Guys online, give me a second. I'm going to switch over to video here. Stop share. Okay. And Monique, if you don't mind helping me out and maybe zooming in with me on this. So if you guys can't see, I'll walk around in just a second and help everyone in class see. But if we've got our line here, connecting the 2 points, yeah, this is going to be interesting. Okay. Can everyone see on your plotter how you've got arrows that are going up and you've got your course and your direction all around the edge? Everyone see on that? Okay. If you have the rotating plotter, by the way, it makes life a million times easier. The whole idea is we're going to align this course arrow that's black on the ruler side, and then we're going to find a line of longitude, and we're going to align our course that we drew with our course arrow, and then turn our little dial here to align vertically with our lines of longitude. Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Does that look good on the screen? You can see it up on the projector. Okay. Sorry, guys, I'm working this out. So I'm aligned to my course, but my arrows are not aligned with the line of longitude right now. So I'm going to turn them up and find a line of longitude. Now I can find that there's a line of longitude right here, but I have a problem. My arrows aren't going there. No big deal. I'm just going to shift my course arrow, or my course alignment, from being in the center to now I'm over on one side. I'm still on course, but now I can overlay one of my upward arrows with that line of longitude. Okay, so I've got upward arrow, line of longitude right here. I'm along my course, and here I'm reading my true course. Okay, so in this case, I'm reading a 052. For everyone online, I hope you saw that. For everyone in class, let me walk around and make sure you guys can get that. If anyone online didn't get it, please ask your question. I'll try to help you get there. You see it? Cool. Here. You guys can use that for now. So go ahead and try to find that course. Line the course that you drew up with this line underneath here. Okay, and then spin this so your arrows are upward along a line of longitude. Did you get it? Sweet. And we're showing our resulting true course. So see how it's coming out here with that direction arrow?
Yeah.
Yep, so you're aligned with that. Okay, so you're about 050. I'm showing about 052.
So line this one up with this dotted line?
Not the dotted line. The magenta dotted line is called an isogonic line. We'll talk about that in a minute. We're lining up with the black hash mark lines, which is a line of longitude. So there's one right here.
Okay. I know, right? And it doesn't have to be the center arrow. It just has to be one of the arrows. You seeing it?
I think so.
Yeah. Now you're a little off course. See how you
Well,
are
so I
not?
drew the wrong one. I put that. Is that
Oh, it's Callahan Airport. Yeah.
okay?
So, okay.
This.
Yep. And then aligned with one of these. So what line are you lining up
This
with?
one.
That one isn't, see how it's just like a road?
Oh,
This hashed one
this.
is your line of longitude. Yep. And then you're reading your resulting true course right there. Cool. You guys seeing it? Okay. Not quite. So, Callahan to Rama. Oh, I see what you're doing. You're circling the town. Good point. There's actually a dot for the town. So we're gonna align the two of them and then line it up. And then there you go. You did it right. Your line is just a little screwy just because of where it started. Okay.
Which line, where do you line it up at?
Cool. And for everyone online, give me 30 more seconds and I'll move on. Okay, so you're lining this up with your course. Good. And then this right here is a line of longitude.
Oh, these?
Yep.
Okay. All right then.
So then I'm just going to shift this so I'm still on my course, but I can rotate my arrow so it's straight up and down.
Okay.
And then,
Yeah, that makes sense.
good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do that there for you guys. Makes sense? Are we good online? No questions so far? I like that. Okay. Now, I'm going to switch back over to this one. All right. So that's our true course. So we're going to use 052 for our true course. So if everyone could write it into the course route there at the beginning. And then in the first upper box of that little segment, TC. So it looks like this. Okay. So everyone online can see it a lot better than everyone in class since the printouts didn't come out very well. But you're going to write 052 in the course route box. Thank you, Monique. And the true course. Got it? All right, then we're going to follow the arrows and we're going to go straight down. True course. Now we have to change. Remember, course and heading is different based on winds. So now we have to figure out what our wind correction angle is. Before we get there, a couple notes on true course. True course, true north is not equal to magnetic north. Keep that in mind, which is why we're having to do some of these conversions to change from true to magnetic, which is what our compass navigates by and what therefore we navigate by. So that's why we're transitioning a couple of these. It is showing my lines of longitude on the sectional. And I use that example. Cool. Wind correction angle. Follow the directions on the wind correction side of your E6B. So everyone online, you should have a link, and I'll pull up here in just a second. So actually, I'll do it now. The link for online. Assuming I can find it. Yeah, here we go. Wind side. And God bless Amelia, since I didn't know this actually existed. And it's awesome. And she found this. So everyone can thank her for doing a great job finding this for everyone on Zoom and for in the class. We can kind of walk through what we're looking at. Does every table at least have an E6B? If you don't, let me know. No? Okay, you guys can use mine. If you move on, I do recommend the metal ones. They're a little easier to use, a little
slightly more accurate. Paper ones are great, don't get me wrong. But I prefer the metal ones and I use it all the time. So let me correct that. I use it all the time in ground school. I don't use it all the time in the airplane. There are also electronic E6Bs and there's apps where you can do this, but we're going to go good old fashioned whiz wheel. So see the directions? It's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to follow the directions. So set magnetic wind direction under the true index. True index is this little thing right here. And the example, it's a good thing I wrote this down since back and forth on Zoom is a challenge. The example is wind is 290 at 18. Okay. So let me write that down on the board so I can see it. Cool. All right. Magnetic wind direction and true index. So I'm going to spin my compass card here until I'm reading 290 under that triangle. Everyone see that? Okay. Next thing on here, mark a wind dot up from the grommet for the wind speed. Bless you. Okay, so everyone here can see this grommet right here. Whoops. Right now it's about 190 or 191. That's knots. Here we go. I'm going to move this to 100 for easy math. You don't have to do this. It's certainly, good grief, certainly easy enough not to. But from 100, if I have an 18 knot wind, it's really easy to go up and see, okay, 118, boom, right there. If you want to start at 120 and go to 138 or some random number, you can totally do that. Just know the difference between the dot that you're going to use a marker, some sort of marker or pencil or something. Okay, who needs a white erase marker to write on theirs? I hope it works well enough. Anyone else? You guys good? Okay. I do recommend a pencil or a marker, like a white erase marker, so you don't have a dot stuck on there that you don't use anymore, because this changes for every new wind setting. Anyone else need it? Cool. All right. So there's the direction. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Now we're going to follow directions after that. So after marking your wind velocity, you're going to set true course under true index. So what's our true course? What did we just figure out? 052, that's right. So I'm going to spin this little dial again until I get to 052. Whoa, this is kind of challenging. I think that's 0. That's as close as I'm getting. Okay, there we go. All right. Easy enough. Next thing on the directions. Anyone want to read it for me? Slide wind velocity mark to the true airspeed. Very good. So wind velocity mark is the pencil or marker mark you just made to our true airspeed. Now, this is something that you need to have calculated before. This is something that you're going to have to make sure that you just kind of do some of the legwork and do some of the math for. I'm going to give you an example, and the true airspeed is 103 knots. Okay, so I'm going to move this until 103 is under my blue mark right here. Okay, so this is 100, 102, 104, and then 103 is right in the middle. Does everyone see that? Where I'm at with that? Okay. And then next thing, ground speed reads under center. So your ground speed is reading 111 knots right now. It's under the center grommet. Okay. what we're looking for is our wind correction angle. And so that's the angle off from the vertical center line. So here is, whoa, right in the middle is 0. And then this is 10 to the left, 10 to the right. Okay, and then of course it's got the scale in the middle. So we're showing about 8 degrees to the left. Does everyone see that? Okay. So going back to, hang on. Going back to this. No. Yeah, guys, sorry. Where am I? Here we go. Okay, going back to this. See how it says -L/+ right, WCA? Literally telling you if you're to the left, you subtract it. So we're going to subtract 8. So under 0.52 in those little boxes, we're going to put a -8. So that -8 goes right here. Okay. Everyone see that? Yes, the box underneath the true course, exactly. So that's your wind correction angle. What's 52 minus 8? 44. 44. Yep, 0.44. So as if you follow these arrows here, you're going to go up to true heading. That's giving you your true heading. And you're going to do 0.44 in that box. Okay. Now, we already talked about the difference between course and heading, and that's wind, which is why we have this wind correction angle. Now we're going to deal with variation. So does anyone know what variation is? Huh? So, well, yeah, something that's not normal. It is. It's the difference between true and magnetic north. So if you look on your sectional, if you look at, some of you were trying to use it before, the dashed magenta line that runs all the way across your sectional, that's an isogonic line that's telling you your lines of variation. Along that dashed magenta line, you're going to find a number. I don't think that's actually on my sectional that I printed out for everyone in class, so I'll pull it up on my real sectional, if you don't mind. All right, so Monique's pulling up Sky Vector here really quickly. So everyone see that dashed line here? And we'll show it to everyone on Zoom in a minute. Thanks, Monique. If you follow that line, you're eventually going to find a number in a direction. So it's 8 degrees east is the closest one to this route segment. There's a 7. Let me see. Oh, that's because you're all the way out in Flagler. You're too far away. They do change pretty quickly. This sectional has a change every ½ degree. Yep, so that one, yep. So Monique is finding it for everyone online. Thank you so much. So that one, you go up a little further, you should eventually find, waha, 7½. Cool, so this sectional is old for the record. The one I'm holding, it's showing an 8 degree east variation. Like I said, magnetic north does move, so make sure you're using current sectionals, not old sectionals. Prime example of why. So let's use 8 because 7½ degrees difference is kind of stupid. So we'll use 8. So if it's 8 degrees east, based on our nav log, is it plus or minus? Minus east plus west for variation. So you're going to subtract 8 again. And you're going to put it underneath. Yes, thanks. I got this. Oh. here? Okay. This is the back and forth. This is why it's a challenging class to teach all over Zoom. Okay, so your variation goes right in this box underneath your true heading. Variation -8. So what is 044 minus 8? 036. And that now becomes our magnetic heading. So now we've transitioned from true north to magnetic, but we're still on heading and not course. We care about our course when we're flying cross country. So our magnetic heading, we do have to adjust one more thing, and that's deviation, plus or minus deviation. Does anyone know what deviation is? Deviation is unique to the aircraft. It is the difference, or it is the magnetic interference that results from different radios and electronic systems in the aircraft that can mess up your compass. Normally, it's only a couple degrees. If you ever put your headset, your phone up by the compass, watch it. It'll start to spin and get off because it's detecting another magnetic field. So deviation is unique to the aircraft. You do need a placard in the aircraft telling you the deviation for the compass. Sometimes it is right up along the compass. Sometimes it is more of a placard like in front of the pilot or co-pilot on the dash on the panel in front of you. But it doesn't need to be in the aircraft. And as you can see, generally it is every 30 degrees, there's a correction. Okay, it'll tell you for due north, steer 005. There is a +5 degree error if you're flying 360. Okay, so looking back at our example, our magnetic heading is 036. Which one of these is closest to 036? 030, right? So if we're flying for 030, we need to steer 027. What's the error? Simple math. -3, -3. So that's our deviation. So we're going to do 036 minus 3 to get to your magnetic heading, or I apologize, your compass heading, and that's 033. Does following that line make sense? Okay, you will be asked the difference between variation and deviation, by the way. Know the difference? One is specific to the aircraft, deviation. One is the difference between true and magnetic north, variation. Okay. Moving to the next one. Compass heading. So if you guys if you've been flying for any length of time, you'll notice that the heading indicator, most of the time, we looking good, Monique? Oh, I don't know. You can play with it. Figuring out the projection online. Woohoo! Okay. So if you'll notice that your heading indicator, if you shut off the plane, you turn the plane around, you park it, you turn it back on, your heading indicator does not match your compass because your heading indicator is vacuum driven. Whenever the vacuum is not operational, it's not working. So whenever you move the plane around, it's not keeping track with the compass. It's not magnetic, okay? Your heading indicator in the airplane needs to be adjusted for whatever your compass is reading. You do that as part of your run-up before you start flying, okay? But that instrument does have a pre-session issue, just natural physics of the instrument, where every 15 minutes or so, you should probably check with your compass again. Hey, my compass is reading 090, heading's reading 092. I'm going to adjust it right now. Okay, so it does slowly precess. The more worn out, if you will, the instrument is, the faster it'll go. And the more often you have to check it with your compass. Now, when you're doing that, you want to be in straight, level, unaccelerated flight. Okay, if you're accelerating or decelerating, your compass is going to be a little wonky. If you're climbing or descending, it's going to be a little wonky. So make sure your wings level, unaccelerated flight when you're checking the two. Some aircraft, that's okay. I hope everyone online isn't about ready to like spin out of their chairs and get confused. Oh, speaking of which, the meeting just died. Okay. That's awesome. I can do it at the same time. Okay, while we're going, a couple things that good to know.
Yeah, we're still on. I don't know
Oh, you're
what you mean
still
by
on?
died.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Can you see? Can you see anything?
Sorry, I was
It
talking.
takes
I was
up to
muted.
the PowerPoint that says compass heading.
Compass heading,
Okay,
yeah.
good. So you can see. Monique's just having issues with her computer, so that's I'm glad you guys can see. Okay, well, hopefully we don't have a Wi-Fi problem here at the hangar. Yeah, good. So we've got a hardwired computer. So long as you guys can see, we're good. Slave versus non-slaved heading indicator. You might hear those terms. Slave means it is literally a slave to the compass. If the it acts as if it were magnetic, just because whatever the compass is reading, the heading indicator is is designed to read the same thing. Okay, so you don't have to always check it and update it every 15 minutes. Okay. However, most of the older aircraft in particular are non-slaved, so you do need to do that. 740 does have a slaved heading indicator because it is a G5. So that one you don't need to worry about. The other aircraft you do, it is non-slaved. You do need to adjust that heading indicator. VFR flight, by the way, don't need a heading indicator. You just need that compass. You need a good grief words. Magnetic direction indicator, which is your compass. So if your heading indicator is broke, you can still fly. Now, you as pilot in command have to make a decision. Do I want to fly in that situation? Am I uncomfortable or am I confident in flying with my heading indicator out? Some compasses are pretty stable. I mean, they do float around a little bit, so you have to be careful with navigating that way. But some are really wonky, and so you just kind of have to be prepared for what you might experience. Magnetometer is something where it's generally in the wing of the aircraft, and it slaves to the heading indicator. So like a G1000 equipped aircraft has a magnetometer, and that's how you have an accurate magnetic heading reading on your heading indicator. By the way, trivia question, a magnetometer does count as able to satisfy the regulations as having a magnetic direction indicator. Compass is not the only answer. Magnetometer is also an answer. That being said, you will still see a compass in planes equipped with magnetometers. All right, airspeeds. You're going to want to write true airspeed in the notes. I don't know why I put that there, since true airspeed is actually on the nav log. Maybe I meant indicated airspeed. I don't know what I meant. But you have true airspeed, you have calibrated airspeed, you have indicated, you have ground speed, and people are like, why the crap can't we just go with one stinking number? Anyone want to know or want to guess? What's the difference between them? Does anyone remember? What? Well, in the example, our true airspeed was 103 knots, but our true airspeed is calibrated airspeed adjusted for non-standard pressure and temperature. Okay? Non-standard pressure. Back up there. Let's see. Let me go through and see what I actually wanted you guys to do with this. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to move on to the example here for airspeeds. First of all, pressure, altitude. Pressure, altitude is the difference between your pressure setting and standard pressure, which is 2992. You must know that 2992 is standard pressure. So if you have an altimeter setting of 30.09, what is your pressure altitude difference? What's the difference between the two? Simple math. Oh, my pen is so bad. Anyone? We need new white erase markers, I swear. This is just sad. That one didn't work very well. Thank you, though. Ha, found the one that works. Okay, 30.09 minus 29.92 gives you a difference of 0.17, right? It's a difference in all pressures. How many feet difference is that? Does anyone remember? 170, yep. It's a 170 foot difference from standard to what the current altimeter setting is giving us, current pressure is. Question is the 170 feet higher or lower? Let's say our field elevation is 8,371. Is it 170 feet higher or lower than that?
Well, it's higher pressure.
It is higher pressure, which results
Lower
in a lower altitude. That is correct. Exactly right. Higher pressure, more dense air, lower altitude. So we're going to subtract 170 feet from the field elevation in this case, which gives us 8,201 feet is our pressure altitude for the day. Now we're going to go to a POH, and in our POH, did I put this on here? Oh, I did. I was thinking ahead. So we have our cruise performance here, and our pressure altitude is 8,201 feet. Well, we don't have 8,201 feet showing here. We have 8,000, we have 10,000. 8,200 is pretty darn close. If I were at 9,000, I'd want to split the difference. Okay. But 8,000, let's say we're going to cruise at a 2,300 RPM setting. Okay. Now we've got a couple columns here. We've got standard temperature, or 20 degrees below standard, standard, and 20 degrees above standard. So what's standard temperature at 8,000 feet? Does anyone remember? And actually, if you guys are online and if you want to unmute and answer, that's actually working great, and I'm good with that. Huh? 59 degrees? Let's go Celsius, not Fahrenheit. What's standard temperature at sea level? Let's start there. You guys absolutely have to know this. 15 degrees Celsius. Okay. So 15 degrees Celsius at sea level. Well, we're 8,000 feet above sea level. Okay. What's your temperature lapse rate? Does anyone remember talking about performance? You probably went over this. Temperature lapse rate is every 1,000 feet you change 2 degrees. Okay. So if we're going up to 8,000 feet, that's an 8 times 2 gives us 16 degree difference, right? Well, if we're climbing an altitude, it's going to get colder, not hotter. So we're going to take 16 away from 15 and give us a -1 degree Celsius as 8,000 foot standard temperature. Okay. At 8,000 feet, the standard temperature is -1 degree Celsius. Okay. I don't think I put this down in the example. No, I didn't. Let's say the temperature outside right now is reading 9 degrees Celsius. Definitely a warm snap for what we're experiencing recently. So 9 degrees Celsius, what's the difference between standard and what it's actually reading? Easy math.
It's 10 degrees.
10 degrees, yes, good. So it's a delta, a difference of 10 degrees, okay? So we've got a problem though. Our cruise performance has 20 below standard, which is -1, and 20 above. Well, we're 10 degrees above standard temperature right now. So we're gonna have to split the difference between these two columns. So if we go 8,000 feet, we're gonna go at 2,300 RPM. Coming over to true airspeed under standard temperature, it's 116. Above temperature, it's 115. Not a big change, guys. And we're not going to fly at 115.5 knots. Okay. I tend to round down on my airspeed because most likely I'm not getting the best performance out of the aircraft because it's older, or I'm just not as skilled as the test pilot who put these numbers together. Okay. So I'm going to go 115 knots true airspeed for the altitude, the pressure, the temperature of this segment of the route today. Make sense? So on here, our true airspeed, we'd put 115. Okay. This changes for different temperatures. It changes for different pressures. That is a big plane for this little airport outside, huh? Yeah. Wonder if it was a twin. Anyway, I digress. It's like a squirrel airplane. We have problems, I know. Pilots are special. Okay, so now we used our POH to find our true airspeed. Now we're going to use our E6B. Oh, I did have 10 degrees. I'm so good. Didn't even plan on that. 10 degrees Celsius is our outside air temperature, and our altimeter setting is still 3009. So we're going to find our calibrated airspeed with our E6B. So, darn. Okay. There we go. Stop share, switch over to, okay. Calculator side. Okay. On this E6B created by someone who's way smarter than me. Can everyone, there it is, just a little slow. So everyone should be able to see this online and here. So this is our flight computer here. It's telling you exactly what to do. For true airspeed and density altitude, set air temperature over pressure altitude, read true airspeed over calibrated airspeed, scaled, calibrated airspeed scale, density altitude in the window. So this is algebra, right? You know 3 of the 4, you're trying to find X. Same thing here. This is the window it's talking about. Pressure, altitude in thousands of feet. I'm going to use 8,000 for easy number, okay? And then my temperature along this scale, and be careful, positives on the left, not the right. So be careful of that. I'm going to use 10 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to turn this until my outside scale at 10 degrees right here lines up with 8,000 feet pressure altitude on the inside scale. Okay, does everyone see that? Who does not see that? Okay. So I continue down here. Read true airspeed over calibrated airspeed. So I've got 2 scales here. I've got a scale on the outside on the black, then I've got an inside scale here. Which one do we know? We know our true airspeed, right? And what did we find it to be? 115, right? 115. So this is where you have to kind of get creative, smart, tricky, whatever word you want to use with the scale. So I see 115. 115 is actually here. Okay, it's not 15 over here. You have to basically interpolate the scale, know what it's trying to say. This could be 11.5. It could be 1.15. It could be any, change in decimal, basically, but it's still 115. Does everyone see that? Okay. So true airspeed over calibrated. True airspeed is going to be on the outside. 105. Calibrated comes inside. I am at 100. Obviously, my airspeed is not going to be 10 or 1,000. It's going to be 100. Make sense? So I can write that down in my notes in my nav log. I know everyone's favorite thing to do is doing the darn nav log. That's okay. If I click this, are you seeing it? No? Okay. Go back to this. Okay. Did that. Okay. So now we've got this in the POH as well. So in here, we're going to convert our calibrated airspeed, we just found as 100, to indicated airspeed. So if you see on here, our knots calibrated airspeed flaps up configuration, which is what we're going to be in cruise, is we've got a 98 and a 107. Okay. And above it, we've got our knots indicated. We got 100 and 110. Okay. So if I want to find 100 knots calibrated and what it would be in indicated, is how would I do that? Because the 100 isn't even there, right? Any guesses? What? Eyeball it. That's one way to say it. Yeah, basically. There's almost a 10-point difference between calibrated. There is a 10-point difference between indicated. So I'm going to take it 1 for 1. Okay, so 2 knots above 98. I'm going to give 2 knots above 100 and go 102 knots indicated is what I should be reading on my airspeed indicator when I'm flying that segment of my course. Does that make sense? I know it's sucky. It's like, why, oh, why do we have to go from this to that, to that, to that, to that, to that? Well, because this is back before you had a GPS telling you your ground speed, your estimated time of arrival, and calculating your fuel burn and all that good stuff. Okay. And it is good to know. It's actually pretty easy to do when you do it a couple times and you're like, oh, flip to this page, you're done. Not too difficult. Okay. Moving on to here. What is ground speed? I know it's a weird question, but it's some other type of airspeed adjusted for what? It is how fast you're going over the ground. It's your true airspeed adjusted for wind. Okay. So we've got our true airspeed is 115 knots. And now we've got some wind pushing us or slowing us down. We got to figure out by how much. So I'm giving you a different example on your E6B from what we did before. So I'm going to go back to that on here. Back and forth online. Sorry, guys. Oh, go away. Thank you. Here we go. Okay. Back to your wind side of your E6B. We're interested in our ground speed. So our example is winds are 130 at 32. First thing we do, set wind direction under the true index, 130. Okay. And 32 knots, pretty stiff wind. Not surprising, winds aloft tend to be a little bit stronger. Okay. So I'm going to do 32 knots difference for my grommet. Set our magnetic course on our true index. We're going to use the same magnetic course we found before. Can anyone tell me magnetic course what we found before? Actually, I'll just give you one. Go ahead and use 320 as our magnetic course. So I'm going to come around here. 320. Right there. Okay. Slide the card. So the true airspeed is, wait a minute, I'm skipping myself. Yeah, so we just did set magnetic course under true index. Slide the card so the true airspeed arc is under the wind dot. Okay. True airspeed is 115. We found out earlier. There we go. So I'm sliding this until 115 is under my blue dot. Everyone see that? Right down here. Okay. Next instruction, ground speed reads under center. That's what we care about. So under our grommet, what's our ground speed? Yeah, I'm reading 146 on here, 145, yeah. 146, pretty darn ground speed in a Cessna, for the record. If you're seeing that, then you are loving life. So 146 knots ground speed. Write that down here before I forget. Okay. Coming back here. Hang on, mouse pad. Oh well. I got it. So, ground speed goes into here. I've got my estimate and my actual. I put my ground speed in that top box. Okay, according to the information I just used to find it, right? Actual is literally as it sounds. You leave that open, you have your nav log on your knee board when you're flying, and you time yourself. Or you look at the GPS telling you your ground speed in flight. So for example, if you're calculating your ground speed is 145 knots before you take off, it ends up only being 120 knots. What can you expect? It'll be longer before you get there, which also means you're gonna use more fuel. Okay, so your fuel reserve might not be what it was. Is it bad enough for you to divert and fill up halfway through? I don't know, it depends on your planning. Okay, so that's something you have to be very mindful of when you're flying. Understand what your estimated is and what your actual ends up being, so you know if you're ahead or behind the curve. What if your ground speed ended up being 150? Cool, you're slightly ahead of the game. You're going to be arriving early. You're not going to be using as much fuel. You're doing pretty well. Okay. And then you can use that to figure out your estimated time en route and your fuel consumption. So your fuel consumption is determined on that cruise performance chart in your POH. We're going to use 8 for a good round number, but you can, the same line you figure out true airspeed, you also figure out gallons per hour. We're going to use 8, pretty average, safe number in most training aircraft. You can use a calculator, you can use mental math, you can use an E6B figuring this stuff out. I'm going to show you how to use an E6B. I'm going to give you a couple equations for a calculator. Mental math, I liked math. I was good at math. You put me in an airplane, I suck at math. It's not good at any level. So I feel like a freaking retard. It just takes my brains and it scatters them. So I do rely on getting the proper numbers figured out ahead of time so that it's one less thing, especially on a check ride. Wait, do I divide this by that or that by this? The last thing you want to be figuring out is mental math on a check ride, because your adrenaline's already pumping. You're already thinking you're failing. So make life easier on yourself. Let's see, what other slide do I have here? Tiny slide. Let's try to get this a little bit bigger. Oi, here we go. One thing to bear in mind too is you need to make sure your units are proper. If you're using decimals versus minutes, make sure that if you are, if it's going to take 5.5 minutes, later on down the line, you're not using like 7 minutes and 15 seconds. You're using the same units throughout the entire process. Okay. Does anyone have a question on how to convert decimals to minutes? It's pretty straightforward. Okay. Time, distance divided by ground speed. This one is definitely huge. What you're going to do is on a check ride, your examiner is going to say, hey, for some reason, you can't go to your intended airport. You have to divert, whether it's a maintenance issue or a weather issue or what have you. Or your passenger's throwing up in the back seat and you need to land now before you smell it and start gagging yourself, right? Definitely a very real possibility. So I'm going to divert to this other airport. Do I have the fuel to get there, and how much time is it going to take me to get there? Time, distance divided by ground speed. Miles per hour, not used a lot, miles per hour, since everything's in knots. So I won't even bother you with the conversion between the two. But just know some of our aircraft and some of our POHs, like poor little 150 putt-putt, use miles per hour, and that was in the POH as well. Those were the numbers. Older aircraft are miles per hour. More recently built aircraft are knots. That's the common unit. Just be aware you're reading everything properly. You're not getting blindsided by a weird unit. So just be aware of that. Distance is ground speed by time. Not normally how we calculate that. Normally we should have a fair idea of what the distance is. What you will use this for is the event of an emergency diversion of some kind. So let's say you're running out of fuel, or your engine seizes or whatever. And you need to know the distance to the nearby airport. You can do this ground speed by time. Not necessarily the most reliable equation, and certainly probably the last thing you're thinking of if your engine actually does seize. You do need to have a situational awareness of, can I reach this airport or not? Sometimes the answer, by the way, the airport's behind you. Don't forget that. Ground speed, distance divided by time. Fuel consumption, like I said, use POH. It does give you specific numbers, but the average is 8 gallons per hour. You are pretty darn safe if you're flying an aircraft with 150, 160, 180 horsepower for 8 gallons per hour. Pretty safe with that average. You really care what the fuel consumption is if your ground speed is significantly lower than planned. If your gauges start reading near empty, that's when you're going to want to let ATC know. Say, hey, I'm running out of fuel here. I'm going to change my plans and land quickly. So please give me clearance to land. Estimated does not equal actual. Very rarely is the math good enough. Not the math itself. The number is good enough when you prepared your navlog to when you're actually flying. Because what's all weather? Weather that you're reading is all history, right? Or forecasted information, one of the two, but it's not real time information. Well, when you're flying, that's real time. So it's probably going to be off a little bit. Let's see. So we're going to use our E6B here to find time and fuel consumption. While I'm switching over, I'll talk through this. Never take off without visually checking the fuel. Cessna fuel gauges and most training aircraft, most general aviation aircraft, fuel gauges aren't very reliable unless they're reading 0. That's the joke. It's only reliable if it's reading 0. You do need to make sure that they are working. They are required instruments for flight, but be cautious of them. They're not going to necessarily read completely accurately. Okay. Some people, some training locations, even up here, want, top off the airplane, have as much fuel as possible. Well, what's the problem with that? Plane's heavier, it doesn't perform as well. And guess what? We sit up at altitudes that many places don't even cruise at. People down in Florida hardly get up to 6,000, 7,000 feet. Okay. And we're taking off at that altitude. So we don't want extra weight if we don't need it. Summertime density altitude up here gets up over 10,000 feet. The plane thinks it's at 10,000 feet already and it hasn't even gotten off the ground. Okay, not the greatest thing in the world. So fuel tanks need to be appropriate for the mission at hand. Always note your takeoff time and when you reach your top climb in each checkpoint, so you can figure out, hey, I'm ahead of schedule and behind schedule, therefore my fuel consumption is ahead or behind as well. Okay. So on your flight computer, on your E6B, you've got this down here.
You've got for time and distance, and you've got for fuel consumption. So let's start with time. Our speed, what's our ground speed? What did we figure out? 146. Our distance is 9 miles. That's going to happen very quickly. So 146 is going to be above this arrow. I'm going to go 146. Does everyone see that? Okay. And then distance is on the outer ring, and then time is on the inner. So if I am out here and I am looking for 9.0, that's what 90 is going to be for me today, 9.0. I'm going to come down to this hash mark, and that's reading for me 35, 36, 37. Is it going to take me 37 minutes to go 9 miles at that speed? No. What will it take me? 37 seconds? Nope. 3.7. See how that thought process works? What makes sense? Do the duh question. 3.7 minutes makes sense. Keep it simple, stupid. That's right. So 3.7 minutes. Now we're going to find our fuel consumption for that. So our gallon per hour we're going to use is 8. So I'm going to go over to 8.0. Minutes on the inside scale. So I'm going to go find my 3.7 and I'm going to go up. And so I'm just shy of the 50. So we'll just round it up to 50. So I'm going to use 50 gallons. No. Am I going to use 5 gallons in 3 minutes? No. I'm going to use half a gallon. Right? That's how you do that. So the duh check. Half a gallon, you start adding that up. So as you continue segment to segment, each line you do this on, okay, first segment of my route was half gallon. Second one was 1.2 gallons. Third one was 3 gallons. Fourth one was, 2 gallons, whatever. You add that all up, you see what according to your calculations, what the fuel consumption will be for this cross country. Okay. Then you need to add the minimums. So 30 minutes in this scenario is 4 gallons, bare minimum of an extra 4 gallons, plus my own personal minimums. I'm going to want an extra hour. So an extra 8 gallons in there. Cool. Put it in there. Do my tanks have enough room to fit all that fuel? Yes, then I'm good to go. Assuming my weight and balance checks out as well. No, then where can I stop along my route to pick up fuel? Right? And does that make sense? These are things you're thinking about when you're navigating. Okay. Quick mental math. Round numbers is all I care about. You visually check. You have 20 gallons before takeoff. How long can you fly? Remember, you have to have that fuel reserve on board when you land. Well, 2.5 hours is the total, but with the fuel reserve, it's only 2, right? Because if you take off that 4 gallon for the minimum 30-minute reserve, now you're at 16 gallons, that's 2 hours. Good. When you have to do this on your check ride, if you are flying and you've made it out to Calhan, can't go all the way to, Lyman, so you divert to Centennial Airport. You look at your sectional or you plug in direct to Centennial in your GPS, you figure out the distance, you figure out the time. Hey, and by the way, use the GPS in the plane. It tells you your ground speed. It is a wonderful tool. You don't have to pull out your E6B, spin it around, and do that in the plane. Hey, all right. It's telling me estimated time en route's 20 minutes. Then I'm going to use how much fuel? Roughly. Just under 4 gallons, right? It's less than a half hour. So I've got 4 gallons in my tank. I can make it there, no problem. That's the mental math level of stuff you're doing in the airplane. You don't need to figure out, I'm using 2.8 gallons. No, doesn't matter. Okay. What? Yep. Keep it simple, stupid, right? Yeah. So, and then round up, be conservative with your fuel estimate. Okay. You will have to do a diversion. You will have to do a nav log. You will have to explain it. Know that you know it. You'll have to do a diversion in flight after you start your nav log. So the first part of your flight is, all right, you take off, you check the time. Cool. Taking off at 20:21 hours, so 8:20. And it's taking me 4 minutes to get to my first point. I planned on 5. I'm ahead of schedule. Sweet. Start going on your next point. That's probably when she's going to divert you and say, hey, you have maintenance issues, or hey, there's a weather front moving in up there. What are you going to do? Or hey, you need to go to another airport that provides services like fuel, rental car, tie downs. So you can't go land nowhere Calhan. Okay, cool. I'm going to divert down to La Junta. It's going to take me an hour to get down there. Do I have the fuel? Yep, I got the fuel. Let's go. Okay. So those are things you're going to have to do on your check ride. Verbalize them. Talk openly what your process is. It'll make it go way easier on your check ride. If she can close her eyes and know exactly what you're doing, you are rocking it. Okay? Okay. Filing a VFR flight plan. Monique, have you ever filed a VFR flight plan? For practice only. Yeah, I haven't even done that. I know how to do it. I can see it, and I can know where to go in ForeFlight and online. I've never once filed a VFR flight plan. They used to be a lot more important when we didn't have ADSB and all that good tracking stuff. For search and rescue, especially if you don't reach your point within 30 minutes, they're going to start looking for you. The bad part of that is if you landed in a non-towered airport, you have to close it yourself. So if you forget, you tie it down and then you go have dinner with your girlfriend, nice romantic dinner, you turn your phone off. 2 hours later, you have a bazillion texts and you're like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean you to send out Civil Air Patrol or, the sheriff to come find me. I'm okay. Please don't be that person. Dave Elliott will get a phone call. Hey, someone on your airport was scheduled to be there and they didn't close their flight plan. Can you go look for them? You don't want Dave Elliott looking for you either. That's going to frustrate his day. So flight plans, if you land in an on-towered airport, you have to close it manually. Towered airports close it automatically for you. It is not required. The PHAC does recommend it. Not surprisingly, it is the FAA. They're going to recommend that. Excuse me. There is information contained that is good for search and rescue, the type of aircraft, the souls on board, the color. That information is in a flight plan. It'll tell your route, your fuel on board, all that good stuff. It helps search and rescue. That being said, we have technology now that's quite a bit improved. ADSB is real time and they can see when you go off coverage. So instead of filing a flight plan, you can get what's called flight following. And you just call them and say, hey, ATC, follow me. I'm going from A to B. If you decide to divert a little bit just to look down, but you're not going far, they're not going to care. If you go way off, then hey, 95 Fox, what you doing over there? Flying back on course? Oh yeah, cool. I'm heading back now. So it is a pseudo flight plan. And because of the ADSB abilities that we have today, it can very easily see where you go off radar. And so it can give search and rescue a pretty accurate point of where to look for you. And it's real time. So you can start moving pretty quickly on that. No, but you have to know where you could do it. You can do it on ForeFlight. 1-800 Weather Brief. That's a phone call over the radio or online. File a flight plan that way. And then the form, you just fill it in. And I had a form over here somewhere. Here we go. But flight plan, route of flight, destination, time and route, alternates, pilot's name, phone number. You literally fill in the boxes. Okay, it's not too complicated. You have to do some performance information to calculate your airspeed and all that good stuff. But it's simple. It's right there. Go ahead. Good. So the question is, if you're diverted, how do you update that in flight? You will talk to air traffic control. They'll divert you if they need to divert you for some reason, they'll divert you. If you didn't need to divert for some reason, you notify them, say, hey, I'm diverting to this airport. They have updated that information appropriately at the time. Yes. You do get clearance from air traffic control. You have to activate a flight plan. Just because you put it in doesn't mean you're ready to go. You have to call them and say, hey, I'm ready to go. They give you a clearance. Okay, fly this heading at this altitude to this airport, squawk this frequency. Okay, so they're giving you a clearance, and then you are on radio contact with them during your flight. Okay, so that's a flight plan. Flight radio, by the way, if you ever hear like Denver radio, Wichita radio, Cheyenne radio, whatever, radio means a flight service station, and they handle flight plans. Okay, so that doesn't necessarily mean the doohickey thing in your airplane. Okay. So you do need to know the difference between air traffic control and flight service station. I have had Jean say that on more than one occasion to me. Has she given you any of that feedback, Monique? ATC and flight service?
Those ones do not close on IFR. ATC doesn't have access to keep up with things.
At a Towered airport?
Yeah.
Okay. So at a Towered airport, even still, you need to close it manually. Another good reason just not to do it. I have had a student do it. He was training for his commercial. He's like, yeah, I'm going to file a flight plan. I'm like, okay, go for it. It doesn't hurt. It's just not always needed. Loss procedures. Climb for a couple of reasons. First of all, it increases your glide distance. If you have some sort of emergency, you have more time to descend and to find a place to land. But more importantly, it also gets you back into contact with line of sight navigation and communication. So if you're too low, you might not be able to contact the tower nearby or whatever, climb, get into that line of sight, and now you're able to talk to someone and they can help you figure out where you're at. Circle, it's sort of like when you tell a kid, hey, if you get lost, stay put, don't go wandering around. Same thing in an airplane. Circle, don't continue going off course. Stay somewhere until you can figure out where you're going. Communicate with anyone you can. Over the radio, it could be your last frequency. It could be, you know, some pilot out here at Meadow Lake. It doesn't have to be air traffic control. Talk to whoever you can. If you can't get anyone on the radio, your phone does work most of the time. It can often get pretty good reception, or at least some reception. Try giving them a buzz. What's the emergency frequency on your radio? 121.5. You absolutely have to know that. You can contact the emergency frequency and say, hey, I'm lost. Can anyone help me? And people, airliners are listening to it all the time, and they're flying way overhead. So someone generally can pick up that communication and they can correspond information appropriately. So that's another way to communicate. When you get in touch with someone, confess. Don't play the ego card or the embarrassment card. Say, I am lost. I need help figuring out where I need to go. Confess it. And then comply with what they're telling you. You don't know where you are, so don't start arguing with them. Say, okay, I'm going to go this way. Okay. And then land. Get down on the ground. Bring your heart rate back down. Figure out where you are. And plan your next cross country. And hopefully don't get lost again. Okay. Try to find the nearest airport on the sectional if possible, specifically if it's an airport that provides services. Huge advantage for VFR flight. Tell you what, if you're lost or if you lose communications in IFR, that is a sucky situation, gotta tell you. So just FYI on that, okay? It depends on where you get lost. If I'm lost in Bravo airspace, they're gonna have an issue with me. If I'm lost out in Kansas, no, but they're probably gonna have me go to an instructor and get tuned up a little bit. Yeah. Yep. So, and don't be ashamed of that. Just say, hey, I do, this was a wake up call. I wish I hadn't had the wake up call, but I did. Now I need to get back in gear. Try to be ahead of the curve though and not get to that point. We see pilots out here all the time. I do anyway, who haven't flown for a while. They think, hey, I've been flying for 30 years and I've got, 1,000 hours, but they haven't flown in 15 years. Guess what? It's muscle memory. You need to fly recently to really keep up to snuff. Do I think you're going to forget everything? No, of course not. Are you going to forget a lot? Absolutely. So you might have to spend a little more time going through some refreshing information and skills if it's been a while since you've flown. Okay. Talked about the check ride profile and the flight diversion. Bottom line for flying: aviate, navigate, communicate. Fly the plane first, figure out where you're going or where you are, and then talk on the radios. Okay. Same thing in an emergency situation when you're drilling with your instructors. Aviate, navigate, communicate. That's the order of things. Fly the plane first. Okay. Like I said before, when you're doing a nav log, you're going to be doing one-on-one with your instructor. You're going to sit down and you're going to go through a plan, put all the numbers together. Your instructor is going to expect you to have that done before your cross country. Monique, does everyone here still require a paper nav log, or is anyone going to a ForeFlight? Do you know? ForeFlight. Or do you know if anyone right now is allowing ForeFlight? Is so yeah, same thing still going on. You're really not going to be allowed to use ForeFlight until after your cross country stage. We want you to learn this way first and this way well. You will be tested on it. It is important to know because guess what? Electronics can fail, battery can go out. You need to understand the why behind it. How an electronic navigation system puts the information together. You need to know the why. Okay, so that's why we require you to do this. And it's good. Some people go, yeah, I never had to do that as a student pilot. Cool, well, look at their skills right now. They're definitely lacking in an area that's important. So it's a challenge, don't get me wrong, but you can get there, okay? Using VORs and GPS in the aircraft will cement those ideas together. Pilotage Dead Reckoning. Remember, you get the joy of looking outside the airplane. Look outside, find those waypoints, and fly towards them. One thing that's big with students that I found is they plan this flight, they figure out that their magnetic or their compass heading is going to be, 132 degrees. So they're flying 132. They look out and they can see their point, and their point is like 145. It's off, okay? But they're still flying 132. Why? You can see your point. Go fly towards your point. If you can see your next point, go there. That course is allowing you the ability to connect the dots if you can't see one to the next. Okay. It's also helping you put your numbers together for your flight planning. Make sense? Everyone ready to blow up and go, gosh, why did I get involved in this? I hope not. Honestly, navigation for me was putting a nav log together was a challenge. I thoroughly enjoyed the planning and the actual flight, but the nav log itself, I'm like, this stinks. Muscle through it, you'll get there. Okay. Ask the questions, use tools, and if you don't completely understand it, welcome to being a student pilot. We will help you get there. Okay. If you have any other questions, or does anyone have any other questions? Let me say that first. No? We good online? Cool. Well, if you do have any other questions you think of later, you can always contact me. I do appreciate your guys' time as I tried to figure out the dynamic of online and in person. So I appreciate that. And if you guys want to help me put the tables together. Oh, yeah, quick question.
It says don't be left the field for start taxi. How much do you
Good question. So on my handout for how to do a nav log, it says, don't forget startup, taxi, and takeoff fuel. That will be on your performance chart in the POH. It'll tell you. It's 1.1, 1.4, somewhere like that in the Cessnas. So don't forget to incorporate that into your fuel consumption. Anyone else? Cool. All right. Thank you guys so much, and have a great rest of your night.